Hi everybody, welcome to show number 5 of the Scannell agenda. Today's date is October 4th, 2013, and I would again like to thank the Cape Cod Community Media Center here at 17 Shad Hole Road in Dennisport, Massachusetts. I'd like to talk to you about a few different things today. I'm going to bounce around. I wanted to mention that issue about the Cape Cod cod apology, and I'd like to mix that with another issue entirely that doesn't belong mixed together, and that is Channel 17 was our channel here at the Cape Cod Community Media Center, and now it's Channel 99. Well, the problem with that is Channel 99 is way out on the other side of the airport, so to speak, on a retail basis. Nobody goes there. And what happens is when you change a station from a place that people were regularly surfing by with their clickers, okay, click, click, and oh, well, you'll stop in and see that. People aren't used to, here on the Cape, availing themselves of all the scheduling. I mean, some people are, some people aren't, a lot of people aren't, and they don't even know that the station switched over to 99. So I'm going to kind of mix that with codfish in that, well, the broodstock value, as I was mentioning, which is kind of a fisheries management actuarial, as I put it, appraisal of the value of the codfish swimming in the ocean right now. And this could be, they could be swimming in the ocean in Iceland or Nantucket Shoals or Georges Bank or the Gulf of Maine. Okay, so there's value, there's an ascertainable value that we can put a financial number upon, for better or worse, and that is the broodstock value. Now, the National Marine Fisheries Service doesn't really do that kind of thing because I think it may be politically objectionable. And they also do not publish, which I think is a scandal. National Marine Fisheries Service refuses, and has for many years, and the politicians back them up. They refuse to come out with the numbers on the permit values. And I've asked, you know, port by port, you know, people like me need a list of the permit values. If I'm arguing against the privately held public resource, so-called public resource rights, and I cannot ascertain from the government, who is covering up, the values of these resource rights that were given away for free. So, you know, you'd think that senators and congressmen would say, hey, look, we're keeping an eye on this. What are these values here? Port by port. I mean, what values does Provincetown own, and what did they own as far as these permit values? And then what values does the Port of Gloucester, the Port of New Bedford, go right down the ports and just list the boats, what permits they have, and then what the market value of those permits are. I don't think that's asking too much. Okay, so the broodstock value, that's, by the way, that's why I was saying all these political fisheries management systems don't work. Any business would be transparent about what these values are. And any business that was running the codfish industry or fishery, they would damn well be putting value on that broodstock, and they'd put a number on it. They wouldn't say, well, it's nice to have codfish. Maybe someday we'll have codfish. Any business, you're kidding me, they wouldn't do that. So maybe Senator Wolf will attain office, and then he's a businessman, so he'll be able to say, yeah, give me a number, give me the number. You know, so these previous governors, they're smiley guys and they're nice people, but, you know, if you want codfish, you better have a businessman who's able to belly up to the bar and say, you know, Give me the numbers first, and then we'll have a talk. So, channel 17 or channel 99. Now, I'd just like to combine that with, all right, let's just take a stand, a possible stand, and say the codfish, the broodstock value of the codfish in the ocean, that's fisheries management talk, is worth $17 per pound. Okay, another stand you could take would be, okay, these codfish swimming around as your seed corn, basically, these codfish. If you want to use that analogy, that's a very apt analogy, seed corn. Okay, these codfish swimming in the ocean now are worth $99 a pound. Now, I think I'd like to go to Nebraska with the cod apology and see what the folks of Nebraska think about some basic issues regarding fishery management. And I think they can come at it with a clean slate. You know, they don't have any, and they're cultivators too, these people in Nebraska. They're farmers, so, you know. They're not foragers, in other words. They're farmers, and there's a difference. And I prefer my market quota system because it's not a system of foraging, but it is instead a sea farm style system. And that's what I think the people in Nebraska will appreciate. They will appreciate more of a sea farm system than a monarchy of a few people holding the rights to, you know, and all kinds of, well, chicanery is what it is when you can't come up with numbers for your fishing rights. All right, so much for that right now. We'll set that aside. On Nantucket, as I was mentioning on the last show about the rebuilding the bay scallop fishery, I want to mention I used what I called the kinder, gentler scallop dredge. And I used it for about 10 years. For about 4 years I was a hand hauler, and that was I hauled all my dredges and put them up on the board by hand without a machine. And so I think I fished from about 82 to 1999. I missed a few years in there to peddle seafood or some damn thing, and a couple other things. But for the most part, I was out there for a couple months at least every year. So this particular scallop dredge was a Nantucket frame, and I'll bring one in and show you. I'll bring in a standard Nantucket scallop dredge. And then one of mine, the only difference was that I did a little experimenting, but I ended up taking all the chain bags off of these scallop dredges. And I was told, hey, you didn't invent that. In the old days, when they sailed and dredged, they didn't use chain bags. Boy, I could see why later on, because when I rigged out all my dredges with no chain bags, I put the throttle down and I nearly flew. You know, I had to bring that throttle way back. So these chain bags, I found instantaneously, were really a drag, and they really slowed the dredge down, the boat down. Now, fishability is the thing. Fishermen want to know about fishability. But for me, the environmental fisherman, I want to know about taking care of the eelgrass and then taking care of the seed, you know, husbandry to the bottom of the habitat. But I also want fishability too. So these dredges, after a fashion, I got them to fish pretty darn good, and I thought they fished just as good. And I kept a regular, usually I had a regular chain bag dredge on the boat. And I can talk more about that later. I'd like to talk about that with some fishermen if they want to come in and talk about scallop dredges. I'd like to have some divers in who have seen the bottom changes over the years. And I know a diver, and I invited him onto the show. Just to describe habitat over the decades. Habitat degradation over the decades as described by someone who can, you know, who has been there actually on the bottom, you know, seen all this habitat. I'm going to get back into the floating marine labs and that, but I want to talk about something I said I'd bring up, and that is a ribbon prison system. This is an idea I just come into my head about a couple of years ago, and I thought that since we need a fence down there on the Mexican border, much more so than the Canadian border, but since we need a fence for security down there, wouldn't it be nice if we could just locate some ribbon prisons that would occupy strips of the border, and at the same time they'd provide 2 or 3 fences for security, and you get your security built in because of course it is a jail or a prison. And so I've been toying around with that. I have some notes about that, but I think that's a fascinating idea. I don't think I've heard that idea anywhere else, and it's really not on the table, but I think maybe it could be on the table. So if that sparks anyone's interest, it's kind of a Yankees way of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. For such a system, I have also built in utility water connections that kind of hug the border, maybe 20 miles north of the border, 10 miles north, you know, depending on the situation. And then, you know, toward the Mexican border, you'd have a lot of what I call closed system sewage systems, whereby we can use green systems to transform sewage products of various kinds into bamboo or some other plants that we can use. And then with my systems also, I take the roots from these plants and I use those roots as tire reefs, as reefs to go with the tire reefs that I've actually been working on the tire reef project since I was a teenager. And Jacques Cousteau was one of my big mentors. I mentioned mentors last week. Jacques Cousteau might have been my biggest first mentor as a little boy, you know, watching all that stuff. A lot of people, I think, can relate to that are my age. And I'm 56. So this prison ribbon system would be quite an undertaking. And I think we do have a lot of property down there on the borders. And I believe the border is 1,969 miles long. And I believe in enforcement of the law on immigration issues, and I always have. And I have also worked as a laborer on the Cape and Islands, so I'm in no mood to give away to foreigners, illegal aliens, my job, because I'm raising a family, hello? You know, and I don't need my wages cut by $2 or $3 an hour. So that's another issue, but I do believe in law enforcement first, and then politics second. We have laws on the books that have been ignored by both parties, just ignored. And frankly, I think that's just an obstruction of justice when you do have the laws on the books, and then you proceed with your political excuses to just ignore them. I don't like that. That to me is un-American and is wrong, and it's just, it leaves the door open for a lot of chaos. All right. So the ribbon prison system, let's work on that. I had it laid out that one prison would be 10 miles wide across the border, and maybe 20 people per mile. And you could even build some nice little shacks or some nice little shrink wrap huts to get things started, and then the prisoners would be there. They could have a little fenced-in area with a goat and some corn or what have you. You'd really have to have some thinking done on this and do your modeling, but I think a good coast-to-coast tripe system, that is the track pipe system, that would bring you water and your utilities And you could either do a monorail system or a wide gauge tripe system that is a 20-foot gauge pipes. These pipes would bring all your water and various things. And they would carry many things. I mentioned that I wanted to nationalize the communications industry. Now that would need a lot of modeling work, but my vision for doing that would be to have the United States Postal Service take over the conduit system that carries, that means the fiber optic network that carries all your communications. Then my vision for that future would be that your postal carrier would bring you a message that was just printed out from his truck or her truck as they come around and do deliveries, and then maybe combining those deliveries with a few other services as well. We can model up things. We don't have to be uptight about doing that. Now, 25% of the tripe system, I envision, will be paid for by these nationalized communications system along with the Postal Service. And for my money, I'm sorry, but I don't like the pensions with the postal systems and all this deficit spending on their part. So I'm the sort of a conservative fiscally that believes in pay as we go. And that's town, state, federal. I believe in pay as we go. I don't believe in all these debts. And so I think part of our reform in this country has to be to do away with these happy-go-lucky debts. I mean, look at Detroit. Look what happened to Detroit. That's ridiculous, you know. Now, who's responsible? I mean, that's a ridiculous situation. I think, you know, the states should be responsible for their cities and municipalities. Now, as far as the water systems that go with this tripe system, I think that they can pay for themselves and maybe 5% of the tripe system. Water systems are going to be extremely expensive. But with the tripe system, we can have a nationalized water system that really makes sense for a very civilized and prosperous society. Any prosperous society, look in your history books. Their water systems and sanitations were de rigueur. They were it. I mean, that defines your civilization. Now we're really regressing with a lot of our systems. A lot of our public systems are going the way of the so-called market. And even though I'm a Republican, I don't subscribe to the market ballyhoo that most Republicans subscribe to. For instance, I don't believe in the medical systems that Richard Nixon basically had them tied into for-profit institutions as opposed to being tied to nonprofits. I think that happened in his reign. So I do believe in the single payer. And I know, well, then you're not a Republican. Well, I am a Republican, but I do believe in single payer because I do not believe, as a conservative, in wasting 30% inefficiency levels in these systems, the mishmash of systems we have now. I don't believe in that. And I think you can hold your head high as a conservative, especially if you are a Rough Rider conservative like myself. That's Teddy Roosevelt, Rough Riders, you know. He's a practical guy, and he wasn't in the hip pocket of the rich, like a lot of Republicans, let's face it, you know, have that problem. And Democrats, I shouldn't just say Republicans, I apologize. A lot of politicians. It's just a sad thing about this country with the onset of all this bribery. That's what they call it in China, by the way. They don't call it anything else in China other than what it is, which is bribery. I was listening to NPR this morning, and there was a teacher who talks about, you know, he was teaching government to Chinese people in Beijing, the normal school, I think it was. And they just say, you know what it is, it's bribery, right? And you can't put a varnish coat on that for these Chinese people. Bribery to them is bribery, and that's what they call our system, a system of bribery, as it's described to them, because let's face it, that's what it is. Our democratic system has become partially a system of bribery. And you could say, and I would say this, we have a three-party system. Democrats and Republicans are your two standard parties, and that's a good thing. Always worked. I like it. I've always been for the two-party system, but I'm not for the three-party system for all the reasons three parties don't work. The money is the third party in the United States of America today. And so people have been fretting about this, and that means people in the Tea Party, people in the Occupy Wall Street. These are splinter groups of your Republicans and Democrats. There's a lot of people like me that are really, you know, getting worked up about this money in politics. Ah, that's good cranberry juice there. Watered down with water. Now, over here we have the Scannell Amendment, Constitutional Convention. I wrote under it. I hope that something similar to this comes up for a Constitutional Convention. I'll read it to you now. For all levels of government, contributions to campaigns and ballot questions shall only be made by individual, non-compensated voters, and only within their own districts. And all policy officials and staff are prohibited from receiving any favors, jobs, or pay from any other than taxpayer-funded sources, unless the exception can reasonably be made by a board of ethics. So that was worked out by me and a few others on something called Get Money Out site. Dylan Radigan sponsored that site, and a few other people sponsored that site. And a few of us got to work on how to get money out of politics. Most of it was just chit-chat. Most of the stuff on these Tea Party or Occupy Wall Street Facebook pages, I'm on Facebook, most of it's all just chit-chat, and when you're trying to get anything done, and people are just, you know, yammering on and chit-chatting, it's pretty annoying. I do my share of yammering on, obviously, but, you know, if you're trying to come up with a solution, you're either on, as I call it, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And number 1 is, what is the problem? Number 2 is, what is the cause of the problem? So lots of people, 90% of people are on those 2 pages. What is the problem and what is the cause of the problem? Now, if you go up the food chain, up the ladder a little bit, the third thing is to make a list of the possible solutions to the problem. Some people call this the scientific method. It was something I studied when I was a teenager, Dale Carnegie books and that sort of thing. I took the course. My dad, as a gift to me, gave me this Dale Carnegie course. But I read the books. And I read one book 4 times, and that is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And that's where I got this. It's a problem-solving technique that I use with others, that I use with my political work too. What's the problem? What's the cause or causes of the problem? What are the possible solutions to the problem? And then number 4 is basically, what is the best possible solution to the problem? So that's the way I think, and that's the way I think politically. Probably my personal life, I should do a little better with that, but politically, here it is. Here's my effort at one of the possible solutions. So let's break that down a little bit. For all levels of government, and of course that means local, so conference on this if you would like with other people locally. Could you live with this locally? that, you know, running for dog catcher or selectman or Board of Water Commissioners or the Planning Board or running for town nurse in the future, I hope, or town nurse oversight board or town nurse moderator. Running for all these volunteer positions is what they are. Wouldn't it be nice if we all had to live by the same rules in politics, and that was that when we make contributions, it has to be done within our own district. This is more for federal, but if we all sign up for this as a local thing, then what's going to happen is it's going to grease the skids for this to pass in a constitutional convention. This is a very important amendment to the Constitution as I see it, because America's biggest problem right now is what the Chinese can see as plain as the nose on your face. It's bribery. It's bribery. Ask any disinterested person around the world what it is. What's our system all about? Partially, a good part of it's bribery. That's what they're calling it. And we're just, I mean, maybe we can't see what's going on. They say maybe, you know, some people are the last to know. So, all right, so in the grand scheme of things, we're going to change this around, or we're going to sink or swim. We're either going to fix this particular problem, or we're going to really flounder around. And you know, other countries are just passing us like we're standing still. We should be growing as a nation much faster than what we're growing now. We're really hamstringing ourselves with all this bribery in government. Well, it's not bribery. Well, it is. Let's take a vote in China. Let's ask the Chinese to vote on this. We love democracy. Let's have some disinterested people vote on this. Okay, I'm going to go right into another show, but thank you very much for watching this program, The Scannell Agenda. And on the next show, this is what I'm going to start out with, this Scannell Amendment. The Scannell Amendment for the Constitutional Convention. It's extremely important that we consider this. I don't think the other things I do are possible without a clean voting system and a clean political system. And I'll get to the clean voting system. That's one of my systems as well. Well, thanks very much, folks, for watching the Scannell Agenda. Thanks, Cape Codders.